Welcome to Teaching Truth. Long Lost Family, presented by Nicky Campbell and Davina McCall, is a television programme which offers a last chance for people who are desperate to find their long lost relatives. The series helps people, some of whom have been searching in vain for many years, to find the family members, often the estranged family members, who they are desperately seeking. Had Long Lost Family been on Egyptian TV back in the days of Joseph, I wonder if Joseph would have featured, as it were, as the estranged member of the family looking for his brothers. Well, in the story of Joseph that we're going to look at from Genesis 42 in our reflections this week under the theme of Long Lost Family, we see his brothers appear, as it were, on the set before him. And although Joseph has not seen his brothers for 20 years, he recognizes them, though they don't recognize him. He recognizes them just as those on Long Lost Family might well recognize brothers who they have not seen for 20 years. Turn with me, if you will, to Genesis 42, and we're going to read the opening verses of the account from Genesis 42. When Jacob learned that there was grain for sale in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you look at one another?" And he said, "Behold, I have heard that there is grain for sale in Egypt. Go down and buy grain for us there, that we may live and not die." So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with his brothers, for he feared that harm might happen to him. Thus the sons of Israel came to buy among the others who came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. In our opening reflection today, we want to think about the crisis that there was, and how the crisis was the chrysalis, as it were, and the catalyst that began to bring this long-lost family together. Just to set the context, after Joseph's interpretation of the king's dream that we thought about in our reflections last week, everything came true just as he had foretold. There were 7 years of bountiful harvests before the years of famine set in. The last time that we saw the family of Joseph together, as it were, was back home in Canaan, and they were far from a united family. In fact, they were a divided family. They were divided amongst themselves, and Jacob, Joseph's father, was mourning uncontrollably for Joseph. Joseph had been taken, thrown in the pit, and sold to slavery in Egypt. As we read through the narrative of Genesis 42, the plot thickens and centers on this long-lost family. This long-lost family who are far from an attractive bunch. See, Simeon and Levi, two members of this family, were guilty of having slaughtered the unsuspecting people of Shechem many years before. Reuben, the oldest son, had committed incest. And Judah had a child by his daughter-in-law. You could well be forgiven for saying that this was the family from hell. But here's the interesting thing to note. And read Revelation. And read the last book of the Bible. Because when the holy city comes down out of heaven from God, note this, the names of these brothers mark the 12 gates of the heavenly city. The names of the 12 tribes, in other words, of Israel. And so even in a crisis situation for this family, God, the hidden hand of God, was able to transform these scheming, sinful brothers into the revered founders of God's chosen nation. Crisis can either pull a family together or rip a family apart. And certainly the family of Jacob, Joseph's family, didn't look very happy at all in this time of crisis. What caused the crisis? Well, the crisis was there was a famine in the land. There was no food, or indeed very little food to eat. There was grain for sale in Egypt. And so Jacob sent 10 of Joseph's brothers to buy the grain in Egypt. A famine began to force this family together. This long lost family, which had divided itself 20 years ago, was now being brought together, or in the early process of being brought together, because there was a famine in the land. And let me just say this by way of leaving you with this thought today. Is there a crisis situation in your family? Is there a crisis situation that is ripping your family apart? Or is there a crisis situation that actually is the embryo, the beginning of bringing your family back together? God can work in very interesting ways. He worked through a famine in the land. There was a crisis, there was no food. And as a result, 10 of Joseph's brothers had to travel. And interestingly, they met Joseph, though they did not recognize Joseph. Joseph recognized them. God used a crisis. Is God using a crisis right now in your family, in your friendships, in your life, to draw you back to Him, to draw you back into His family? Allow the story of Joseph and the crisis that was created in this family to speak to you and challenge you today.